Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's screening of Sorry We Missed You. This is the third screening at the Film Theatre. There were two last week. My name is Peter Hames. I'm chairman of the Film Theatre and a former programmer. And I've sort of met Ken Loach several years ago. He came here and introduced one of his films and did a discussion. He's also an honorary doctor of Staffordshire University. He has other links with Stoke-on-Trent. I think he filmed his television film Rank and File actually in Stoke-on-Trent. He's not here tonight, but we're very pleased to have with us Rebecca O'Brien, who is his producer. She's been producer with him for, I think, his last 18 films, give or take 2.
30 years.
Yeah. How many?
30.
30 years?
Yeah.
Oh, it was 18 films I mentioned.
Something like
Yeah, yeah. So she's
that. Don't have them anymore.
she's well aware of working with Ken Loach, and she's going to introduce the film shortly. Before that, I'd like to introduce Mark McDonald, who's the parliamentary Labour candidate for Stoke South, who wants to say a few words about 0 hours contracts, which, of course, is the subject of the film. Mark.
I'm only going to be very brief because you're obviously not here to see me, and you're really here to hear Rebecca and see the great movie that's going to be shown. What I wanted to talk to you about was, of course, 0 hour contracts, which is a blight upon our society. And I say that for a number of reasons, but first of all, I just want to tell you a story of someone I met last Sunday. She had nursed her mother. She's a constituent in Longton. She'd nursed her mother who had died. She'd got onto benefits and she'd got onto universal credit, and she couldn't afford to live on universal credit, and she landed up in a food bank because she didn't have enough money to be able to survive and buy food. She managed to get a job as a carer, and when I met her on a Sunday afternoon, she has been working for an agency that morning, on a Sunday morning, and she'd come back because they didn't need her for 5 hours, and then she was going to go back to work that afternoon for a number of hours. And that's her shift. When they didn't need her, they didn't need to employ her, and they didn't need to pay her. And that, in essence, is what 0 hour contracts is about. It's about insecurity of work. It's about ensuring that you don't have employment rights. So you don't have sick pay. You don't have annual leave. You don't have security of employment. But more importantly, you have an employer, and I think the gig economy, as they called it, produced £86 billion, I think, last year, of which 90% of those who work under the gig economy earn less than £10,000 a year. Without workers' rights, without sick pay, without annual leave. And this is where we are, and sadly, as a result of, let's face it, a capitalist society that's gone out of control, that is about profit making. It's about squeezing the individual as much as they can to make as much money for large corporations. And we see this most clearly in the major cities with Uber, with Deliveroo, with Uber, I said Uber, and Deliveroo and other delivery companies that in effect pay limited amount of money to the employees and give them no rights. But also you have this situation where, as an employee, you're frightened because you want to work, you need to work, and you have an employer that will sack you like that and get rid of you. And it reminds me of those days when we used to see the dockers waiting on the street corner for people to come and pick them up. and they didn't know if they were going to be working that day, and they'd stand out in the freezing cold, hoping that they were going to get a job for the day. That is exactly where we are, and we can dress it up as much as we want in a different way, but that is the society, sadly, that so many people are living in today. And we've got to do something about it. We've got to do something about it. And the only way that we can do something about it is to have a change, a radical change to our system. Now, next week, we're going to have a choice about how we're going to, whether or not we want to have a radical change to our system. I was told not to do any electioneering, so I'm not. But we are. You decide who you want to vote for. But I can tell you now that under the Labour Party, we will ban 0-hour contracts. Simple as that. I've had the privilege and the pleasure of sharing platforms with Ken Loach on a number of different issues. He is by far one of the greatest directors we have in this country. Some of you have watched his past movies, and I know this is going to be very reflective of the great work that he's done in the past. So I, like you, I'm looking forward to watching this movie. I'm going to hand over now to Rebecca, who's going to tell you and introduce you a bit more about the movie. But thank you very much.
Behind every great man, there is... Somebody's got to do the work. Somebody's got to do the organising. And that's me. I mean, what I do as a producer, my role as a producer, is I nurture the project. I don't just raise the money. That would be boring, and it's actually the worst bit. And I don't just spend the money. That would be boring too, although it's a bit better than raising the money. My role as producer is to, I'm there from the inception of the idea, when Paul Laverty, who is the most important other person of the three-legged stool that we are, Paul and me and Ken, Paul is our writer, Paul Laverty is the writer, we meet and we eat and we chat and we compare notes and we discuss what's happening in the world, and we discuss and wonder what stories should be told by us, because we like telling stories. And we're always rambling on at each other telling stories. And anyway, we sort of zoom in on something that seems to be the order of the day and seems to be the thing that's most urgently bullying Paul in the head. And that's what ends up being the next film. And I'm there at that point when we decide what to do. And if I think it's impossible, then I'll say so. And if I think they're barking up the wrong tree, I'll tell them that they're barking. But then I guide the film. I'm there as, I suppose I call it, I'm the first second opinion all the time. I'm the first audience for any idea that's had. And so I sort of supervise the film, and I'm there from inception right through all the different processes, the script development, the idea of where we're going to shoot it, the location finding, the casting, the pre-production, the crewing, the actual shoot, the editing, the music, and then the marketing and the getting it out there, the showing it to all people like you and getting you in, and that's part of my job, and right through to the archive. So my role is a sort of overview of the whole thing. I guide the film and look after it. Ken does the detail. Ken does the intricate work of what shot to do and who is actually going to be in it and who's going to. But I'm there as his sort of sounding board. I'm the audience. And this film, Sorry We Missed You, evolved through. It sort of came about because of I, Daniel Blake. And I, Daniel Blake, which many of you may have seen, which was about the welfare, the the situation for people who are on job seekers allowance and all that. And we found ourselves visiting a number of food banks during the course of that film. And we showed the film to people to raise money for food banks, because that was one of the main things of the film. It featured a food bank, and that powerful scene. I think people who didn't know about food banks, who went to see I, Daniel Blake, learnt about food banks. Anyway, one of the shocking things that we discovered about food banks is that there are people who go to food banks who are working, who are in full-time or part-time employment, as Mark says, on 0 hours contracts. They don't know where their next paycheck is coming from, but they're employed. And sometimes, some weeks, the money is really bad and they are stuck and starving. Now, what sort of country is it that has people in employment and parents of children, parents of, there are a lot of children in poverty in this country, and they're mainly mainly children of people who are working under 0 hours contracts. This is what we discovered when we were making I, Daniel Blake, and so that the kernel of that idea got into our heads, and we thought, well, down the road from Daniel Blake is a family, and that family are, in Theresa May's words, just about managing. And they're just about managing because they are employed. And Abby is a care worker. And Ricky decides to, he's been working in lots of jobs, and he decides to pack it in and, join the enterprise economy, be self-employed, stand up for himself, make money for the family. And that's where the film starts. And it starts there because we've also discovered, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, that you are only 3 paychecks away from disaster or heaven. You can, the gig economy, the 0 hours contracts, works fine for some people. It works fine for students who want to get a bit of money while they're at university, and it works fine for some people who've got incredible energy. But if you get sick, or if you get, or if somebody at home is having a problem and you need to be there, all sorts of problems begin. And that's what Sorry We Missed You is all about. And the film is a story of our times. It's about any family. It's about the family down the road from Daniel Blake. It's about the family down, and you will recognise people within this film, because I bet you know somebody on 0 hours contracts if you're not on them yourself, and I bet you know somebody who's a care worker, and so it's just about how a family holds it together in those situations. So it was irresistible to make this film as a sort of companion piece to I, Daniel Blake. And rather stupidly, we thought, well, you make 2 films in Newcastle, you should probably make a 3rd. We haven't decided what that's going to be yet. So what I'm going to say is relate to the film, understand the people in it. I hope you enjoy them. I feel that the family in the film are a real family to me, and I love them dearly. And that's one of the wonderful things about being a film producer, is that you, and certainly working with somebody like Ken, is that you live the life of the film while you're making it. And particularly with Ken, because our process is that we film in sequence. We tell the story. A lot of people cut films up and do it in the most I used to be the queen of the complicated schedule until I started working with Ken, and said, no, you've got to start filming scene 1 and you go through to scene 45. And oh God, how is that possible? How can you film in a straight line? But the way we work is we give the actors a bit of the script at a time. We film in sequence so that we give people if there's a surprise, we film that separately. We film that without the actor knowing, and we tell it. We try and tell the story to make it feel like real life, because in lots of ways it is real life. And as part of the crew, you're living that story, and you can't work with Ken and not be affected by it and not become part of the story. So I'm sort of slightly wounded after 18 films and 30 years of working with Ken. I've lived all those stories. But I hope you managed to live this particular story tonight. And I also, there's going to be a discussion afterwards with some union people and local candidates. And so I hope you'll stay for that as well, because I'm hoping that the film will trigger some anger and some emotions in you that will help you go out and fight for the right candidates to vote for next week. Thank you very much.